Good morning. Thank you for making that early session. It's been an amazing week at Dreamforce. I don't know, how's yours so far? You like it? Okay. I was at the booth the whole day yesterday, the whole day, and I'm about to lose my voice, so I apologize in advance. I swear it's because of a cold. So, my name is Gunnar. I work on platform developer tools, and I thought today I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like switching from Eclipse to Visual Studio Code. And the motivation I'm doing this is, who of you have heard about Salesforce DX? Amazing. So with Salesforce DX, we're going to switch our tool, our development tool, from Eclipse to Visual Studio Code. So we've provided an awesome extension for it. I talked about it on Tuesday. If you missed the talk, don't worry. They're all recorded and available online. I highly recommend you go look it up and watch it. All right. Just a reminder, I'm talking about Eclipse and Visual Studio Code anyway, but only make purchasing decision what's available on our website today. Okay. So, who has worked with Visual Studio Code before? Not a lot. Good. So, everyone else worked with Eclipse, I assume? Okay, cool. So, I'll talk a little bit about, just get an idea so that you have an idea what Visual Studio Code actually is. And then I go through a list of differences and similarities that I've compiled together, which I find make it very helpful for myself to change or switch from an Eclipse context to a Visual Studio Code context. There are a lot of differences, but also a few things that are very, very similar. Okay, Visual Studio Code. So the most important thing about Visual Studio Code, it's not Visual Studio. It's a lightweight source code editor that really was created by Microsoft to make source code editing rocking, basically, right? So it's not a full-blown IDE, but nonetheless, it's an awesome tool. You can go to the website, codevisualstudio.com, and download it. There's an installer for Windows, there's an installer for Mac OS, and there's also DPM packages and RPM packages for Linux available. It's free and entirely open source, which also applies to our Salesforce DX extension, in case you want to install it and then try it. All right. So the first thing you may notice, it's colorful, right? It comes up with a black theme by default, a dark theme, but you don't have to use it. For example, I prefer working in the lighter theme a lot, because spending the whole day in front of the monitor is I find it very easy to use. Go check it out. You don't have to stick with a dark color. I know there's a lot of effort going on with Eclipse to try to rebuild the dark theme. The one in Visual Studio Code is really a lot better because it's basically a browser application, so it can use CSS styling, and that's why it's also very, very easy to switch the themes. Go to the preferences, and then there's a theme menu, and there you can select the different one. I personally use the Light Plus one. The next difference is the UI. The UI has been radically simplified. There's no more custom perspectives, and there will be no more custom views. All you really have is the sidebar, the editors area, and a panel at the bottom. And we, as an extension, we can add content to it, but no matter what extension you install, there will be no more custom views, right? So that's the thing you have to realize when you install an extension such as ours is there won't be any custom areas where we present specialized objects. No, the idea is really that when a user uses the source code editor, no matter what language he's working on, whether it's TypeScript, Java, Apex, Visualforce, or Lightning components, it's all the same. It's gone like the usability, the user experience is all the same. The one key feature of VS Code is really extension marketplace that is built in right into the product. So you can go on the sidebar. The last icon down left is the marketplace. You can also go to View Marketplace and search for extensions and install it into Visual Studio Code. And that's also how you install the Salesforce DX extension. Just open Visual Studio Code, go to the marketplace, and search for Salesforce DX. Right? And like the topmost item on that list is our extension pack for Visual Studio Code. And there's a ton of other extensions available on the marketplace, things that help you working with Git or other source control version systems, and also YAML, whatever, like any kind of language or tool that you want. Go check it out on the marketplace. It's really helpful, and it's very easy to install those extensions into Visual Studio Code. I don't know who was ever struggling with Eclipse, but Eclipse by default comes in different packages. If you were unlucky, you downloaded a package that did not come with a marketplace, so it was painful, very painful to install extensions. That's no longer the case with Visual Studio Code. Now, here's really also a very significant change when you come from Eclipse, is because of the restricted UI for extensions, there's no more dialogs and no more wizards. It is like when you configure something, everything is really file-based, is source-driven. There is even like the preferences in Eclipse, in VS Code, it's a JSON file. And there's two locations. There's one in the user home directory. That would be the settings that apply like globally, like to every single workspace that you use with Visual Studio Code. And you can also have workspace settings. That's actually something I would recommend when you're sharing code in a Git repository, because in those settings, you can also give recommendations to other team members about useful extensions. So when you have a project that you're working on and you store it in the workspace and commit it into your source control system, and then the other team member checks out the project, opens it in his workspace, he immediately gets the list of extensions that he might be missing. It's very, very useful. And also things like build tasks and launch configurations, they're all stored in files. And this way, they're easily shareable across team members that work out of the same source control repository. So I mentioned the word workspace before, but when it comes to files and folders, VS Code really is an editor, not an IDE. The workspace, by definition, is just any folder in your file system, right? You no longer have to set up a specific workspace and create or import projects. You just use it and open any file or any folder on your system. And this is also the way it works with our Salesforce DX project. You just have, you clone the repository from Git or whatever you have, and you open code just in that folder. And what happens is that it will discover that there are additional, there are project-specific files in those folder. Like for SFDX, it would be the SFDX-project.json file. And that triggers additional functionality contributed by the plugins. So you don't have to set up anything. You don't have to mess around with any sort of configuration. You just open it in a folder, and it works. And of course, you can open it multiple times with different folder at the same time. A very common utility that you will use in Visual Studio Code is the command palette. And who knows about Eclipse Quick Access? Oh, not a lot. OK, so it's actually very similar. So in Eclipse, you have Quick Access, which is Control-3 or Command-3 on the Mac, I guess. And our command palette is Control on Windows, Command on Mac, Shift-P. It basically gives you a window, and that window is populated with any action, with really all the actions that are available in VS Code, and you can execute. So you no longer have to memorize a specific menu item or a specific location where you want to do something. You just open the command palette, and you start typing. And then it filters the list of possible commands or actions that you can perform. We use that also to integrate the Salesforce CLI with Visual Studio Code. So it's very easy to execute CLI commands from within Visual Studio Code. The same thing is, so it's really similar to Eclipse, Eclipse Quick Access. Another similarity is how you navigate to files. And you may realize it looks extremely similar to the window before, because really a common theme in Visual Studio Code is make you feel comfortable and reuse UI patterns. So in Eclipse, there was the open resource dialog, which allowed you to open any file in the workspace. In its Command or Control P on VS Code, and it does the same thing for you, right? So it populates a list of files in a workspace, so you can start typing. It does substring matching, so you don't have to memorize or remember the whole file name or the folder structure. Just start typing, and it narrows the list down, and you can easily pick and open the file. It's a it really makes working with your workspace very, very efficient. Eclipse Content Assist is also available in Visual Studio Code. It's labeled IntelliSense there. But essentially, it's the same thing. It's code completion. So you can code complete, control space. It's actually the same shortcut in any specific location of the file. And it gives you smart completions based on actual analysis of the context the file you're into. Now, this actually is not something that's so the core functionality is baked into Visual Studio Code, but the smartness, the things that populate the content of the IntelliSense are the extensions. So in order to have it for Apex, you have to have our Salesforce DX extension installed. Similar is true for Java. You can even write Java code with VS Code, and there's a Java extension that you have to have installed in order to make it work. But it works really similar to the Eclipse Content Assist. The next thing, Eclipse Quick Outline. Anyone knows about that? It's very convenient or easy to navigate within the methods and variables in a file. So just in VS Code, it's called Go to Simple in File. The shortcut is similar to one in Eclipse. It's Command-Shift-O, and it gives you a pop-up with all the methods, variables, and other things that are defined in the actual file that is visible in the editor that you're editing. That's very, very helpful if you're using large files, right? That are difficult to scroll and to search for. No longer use search. You should really use Go to Simple in File if you have the rich editing enabled for a particular language, because it makes it very convenient to find a specific method or go to a specific location or variable. And once you start typing, it's the same thing as with Go to File. Substring matching, anything is supported. Okay, so one last feature I think is very, very similar to the to Eclipse is the debugging functionality. If you've missed the demo I gave on Tuesday, I go to the website and go online and watch the talk again. It allows you to debug any source code. Even like with our extension, you can debug Apex code. And it's really like in a full IDE, right? Even though Visual Studio Code is supposed to be an editor, like the debugging functionality is actually true IDE style tooling, right? So you connect to a debugger by either launching an application or, in our case, connecting to a Salesforce org, Scratch org, and then you can set breakpoints. You can, once the breakpoint is hit in a trigger or in a class file, you can step through the code, step into, step out to, step over. Like all those common things are supported, and you can inspect the variables. You can set watch expressions. The call stack is being reported, right? So you can really see what's going on. And we also, like, in the case of Apex, we also support, like, if there's debug output running on the server, like system with the system debug command, it's printed right in the debug console in VS Code, right? So as you are printing out stuff on the server, it shows up in Visual Studio Code. So, but again, debugging is like all the functionality that you know from Eclipse is supported, also available in the same, like in a similar, very totally similar way in Visual Studio Code. Okay. Last but not least, I've compiled a list of available resources that's also available in the slides. The slides will be uploaded in the system. Yeah, take pictures if you want. And now is actually a good time because we still have a couple of minutes left to ask any questions. And if you don't mind, or if you want, I'm also sticking around for a bit after the session. So just come by and ask any questions. Thank you very much. Okay.
Any resources that you would recommend for things like interacting with Git from VS Code, stuff like that?
So the question was, are there any resources I can recommend about interacting with Git from within Visual Studio Code? And frankly, there's only like the online documentation that's available in VS Code, because the built-in Git handling in VS Code uses the command palette a lot, similar, so you can execute the Git command to commit stuff and to push and pull to a repository. However, I recommend I personally use Git Lens, an extension on the marketplace, which makes it very convenient and very easy to visualize the history of a repository. Because for me, I'm very interesting to see what's going on, especially in a team with very many developers. So Git Lens is a nice extension that I would recommend for that.
Any other plugins beyond just Git that you recommend?
No, that's about the, so any other plugin than that was the question. Git Lens is about the only additional Git plugin that I've installed in Visual Studio Code. And the other thing is, Visual Studio Code, and this also applies to our Salesforce DX tooling, works very nicely in parallel with a terminal, right? So you can do any operation in Visual Code. At the same time, you can also do it in the terminal in the same folder, and they are working together. So if I understand correctly, the question is, if I'm editing locally, how does the change get pushed back to the server in case of Salesforce DX? Right. So it's very similar to how it works with source code management systems. You check out the code from the server into a local working copy. That's the folder on your file system. There you make the changes. You basically work offline, right? And then you commit it, and then you push it back to the server. That is in the sense of Git. And Salesforce DX supports the same operational pattern. So you pull down the source from an org or from a Git repository, whatever. You have it locally, and then there's a command inside Visual Studio Code or in the CLI that allows you to push the code to a Salesforce org. And that's how it's deployed to the org. Yes, and in the case of Salesforce DX, so the question is how follow-up changes get propagated. In the case of Salesforce DX, you can then open the Scratch org, make modifications there, and pull them back down into your local file system, right? And similar, you can also make local changes and incrementally push the changes over to the server. So another Salesforce DX related question, if it only works with Scratch orgs or other orgs. Right now it only works with Scratch orgs. It's only supported with Scratch orgs. However, I recommend you going to the Salesforce DX booth. They have a great tutorial up there and a demo, and we're also happy to answer any additional questions that you have about that. All right, so we're about time. Thanks very much for your attention. Thank you.